Episode: Mother's Open Heart Surgery and Coma. Mother's Open Heart Surgery Challenges. In this episode, I will share my mother's journey from open heart surgery to returning to her home in San Martin. My mother was in Kaiser Permanente Hospital in South San Jose, California, awaiting her open heart surgery. We were all there at her bedside. We all offered moral support and we prayed for her. And she was wheeled off to surgery. As she said desperately, "I don't want to die." I wondered if those would be the last words that I would ever hear from my mother. "I don't want to die." I could only reply, "I love you too." The surgery was over, but my mother did not wake up. She was in a coma. The doctors explained it was not normal to be in a coma following her surgery. They suggested that she might wake up any moment. But after a few days passed, the doctors explained that she was now less likely to recover and wake up, but they would give her time. She had over 30 separate drug IV feeds into her body. She had oxygen intubation so that she could breathe through a machine. She had excrement removing tubes in her body. Her arms were strapped to the sides of the hospital bed to stop involuntary convulsions that might interfere with her oxygen or IV tubes. It was incredibly sad to look at. It was heartbreaking to know my mother was in that situation. I took advantage of our having our RV parked in a remote Kaiser hospital parking lot. I was at my mother's bedside for all visitor hours except when my siblings also visited, to avoid conflict with them. In fact, we had to make a visitation schedule to avoid even seeing siblings, as there was far too much animosity and hate now between us. There was no place for that hatred when my mother was on death's door, or so I felt. With emotions and fears flying high, and the animosity between Cynthia and her children against Jolene and me, it was apparent each group had to operate independent of the other. While we were able to stay clear of my siblings, they were unable to stay out of trouble anyway. Cynthia and her son were visiting my mother, and there was some kind of incident in the hospital. I recall Cynthia allegedly refused or repeatedly forgot to use sanitizing lotion and gowns provided. When challenged by medical staff to comply, she exploded emotionally, so much so that they banned her from visiting my mother, her mother, in the hospital. Cynthia's son, David, was likewise banned from visiting my mother. Neither Cynthia nor David were pleased with their being banned, and they blamed me. They insisted that I was responsible for their situation. David impersonated me to see my mother in one visit, as it was reported to me by a nurse that recognized me and she knew who David was, and was not me. You get the idea. Cynthia and her son David were emotionally unstable and did not care about protocol, rules, or safety. They only seemed to care about themselves and whatever it is they wanted. Let's get back to my vigilant visitation with my comatose mother. I read several pages from my mother's father, my grandfather, that he wrote when his wife was dying of cancer, and what he wrote after she died from it. My grandfather wrote mostly of Christian and Catholic hope and faith. They were hallmarks for how he offered love to his dying wife, and how he coped with her passing. I recounted my mother's life's journey and how she paved the way for women to be engineers. She was a firmware engineer, and not to be limited by shallow appearances or social expectations. I regaled her triumphs in life, overcoming so much adversity. A nurse came to me one day and told me that he had never heard or seen such a committed, loving son before. He said that my devotion was so clear, that my love was so obvious. He wished that my mother would have the best and he said that I should hold out. He offered hope. Sometimes people just need more time to wake up, he said. A neurologist informed me that my mother may have suffered hypoxia, a series of small strokes across her brain, often caused by oxygen deprivation. The neurologist furthered that my mother had blood across her brain, which was normal, she said, for the elderly, apparently. But my mother had more blood on her brain than was typical, even for her age. The neurologist concluded that it was very likely that should my mother wake up from her coma, she would suffer delirium for months to even years. She explained that delirium can in fact become permanent dementia if they do not recover. But she also explained they can recover from delirium and not fall prey to dementia. In any scenario, the neurologist explained that my mother should make no major decisions or actions for years following her waking up, should she wake up. So my mother was either lost to a coma or was going to wake up without her mind intact. It was horrific. I had no idea how I could help her or what I could do. My mother woke up from her coma, sort of. She was not there, really. She was able to function without the intubation ventilator to breathe. And she was progressively on fewer IV drugs. Eventually, she was able to stand on her own. Her legs and body had atrophied from so long in the hospital, not moving in a coma. My mother was to be transferred finally to a recovery home when she was able to slightly walk about. The closest recovery home with decent reviews was in Morgan Hill, California. Morgan Hill was the city adjacent to the unincorporated area called San Martin. The idea was that my siblings from San Martin could visit and check in on my mother for as long as she might need to be in the recovery home. Unfortunately, the recovery home felt like a third world nation. Beds were futons on the floor. I suppose people could not fall far should they roll off. Everything was dirty, dust, grime. It was unclean. They were understaffed, way understaffed. They had very few doctors, maybe one, as most everyone was on a bedpan, linens, and watch duties. I had a few big takeaways from my mother's journey, from her open heart surgery to coma, to the recovery home, and then to home. Be proactive about your health, especially serious health conditions, before it's too late and things escalate to life-threatening states. My mother delayed a lower risk heart valve operation called TAVR, T-A-V-R, to the point that it was no longer a viable choice. Her heart valve had weakened so much that she may not even survive a TAVR surgery. And so, my mother ended up needing full-on open heart surgery, which led to her coma, and so much more life-damning maladies. As you'll hear, in a lot of ways, she died that day. She never returned to be the person that she was. Medical health care in America is not necessarily good. In fact, American healthcare can be downright bad, like a third world nation. Medicare pays for the bare minimum in recovery care and hospice. American healthcare focuses on function and dismisses psychology and mental acuity. My mother could barely stand up and walk. She could narrowly communicate anything meaningfully, but they punted her out of the hospital at first opportunity to a third world quality recovery home. And no one ever cared about my mother's mental faculties or competence from days to years after her discharge and returning home. No, my mother's open heart surgery pretty much ended her life. She now sits every day in a wooden chair in her kitchen, reading the newspaper, from front to back, over and over. She cannot recall what she has read, so it's always a new article, no matter how many times she reads the paper. She does not go outside, but maybe once a month, she'll go with a daughter to a nearby grocery store. She has no social life. She cannot recall her past. She does not even know that she bought and owns the house that she lives in, as she expresses appreciation for someone that lets her stay free of charge in the house. She cannot maintain even 2 topics in her head at a time. Any new topic supplants and replaces the prior topic. She no longer values the knotty pine wooden walls of her house, something that she loves so much that she would joke she would like to be buried in a coffin made from those walls. Of course, she has stated that she really wants her body donated to science. So the wall coffin was, I assume, more abstract and ideological. She uses a calendar to know when she should call someone, like for birthdays. She waits for the day that she will die. It is all very sad. I wish that my mother had been proactive and had that TAVR heart valve surgery when it was an option. Her delaying out of fear ruined her life.